Thank you everybody for joining our Precursive webinar, which is all about the pitfalls to avoid in fast scaling SaaS. I'll just start with a quick agenda of what we'll be covering. So we'll start with some introductions from myself and Alex Farmer, who is our guest speaker and VP of Customer Success at Cognite. I'll then hand over to Alex to talk us through challenges of scaling in scaling fast, those early warning signs, and getting visibility of scalability, which was the sentence I was most scared of saying and not the one that I tripped up on.
Really well done.
Thank you. We'll then go on to a really quick demonstration of how Precursive can help you get that visibility, and then we'll end with a Q&A with Alex. So on to those introductions. If you've been to any Precursive content before, I'm sure you recognize me. I am the product marketing manager at Precursive. Before this, in my previous life, I was the head of onboarding at a company called IncoPro, where Alex and I worked together. So Alex, over to you for your intro.
Well, thank you, Zoe, and it's great to be back with you today. As I said before we kicked off, it's great to not only get the old band back together, so to speak, but you can also call BS on everything I'm about to say, because you know if we actually did it or not back in our shared time at IncoPro. And I also feel uniquely qualified to be here because I feel like I know a heck of a lot about pitfalls, and we will be covering some of those today as well. Great to be with you all today. My name is Alex Farmer, as Zoe mentioned, currently VP of Customer Success at Cognite. Before that, I led the post-sale function at IncoPro, a legal tech scale-up based in London. And before that, I spent 5 years at a company called Fairsail, acquired to be renamed as Sage People. And they were a Salesforce-based HR tech platform. So the Salesforce ecosystem is also something I'm relatively familiar with. As I tell our sales ops leader at Cognite, you can't take away my Salesforce admin license this week. He loves that. So hopefully I'm worth the extra cost. Great to be with you and look forward to talking about fast scaling and the relevant pitfalls. Cognite, we grew our services headcount by over 100% in the last year and a half. So we've had a lot of change and a lot of need to kind of rethink, and I'm excited to cover that with you all today.
Great, thank you. Before we go into the webinar, let me give everybody a bit of background as to the topic that we chose today. So at Precursive, we have seen a distinct change really between the old world and the new world of SaaS growth. In the last months, we've seen lots of change in the macroeconomic environment, changing sentiment in public markets, and really a very different world for tech startups. What that means going into the new world is that it is no longer growth at any cost, but rather a more responsible form of growth where companies want to be more in control of managing the costs that come about when you are scaling. Now, enough of me. I'm going to hand over to Alex to get us started with the pitfalls to avoid. So Alex, over to you.
Thank you, Zoe. And I think, that's a very topical and relevant point, right? We see in the new world, it's only been a month or two in this seemingly new world where growth at all costs is no longer the modus operandi, but responsible or profitable or sustainable growth is now what investors and organizations are really focused on. And that's important. But then, of course, it becomes even more challenging if we're scaling incredibly quickly, right? As things increase in velocity, the ability to cope and manage manage change gets more challenging, right? So I think there's a lot of lessons to be taken. So the first kind of section of what I want to talk about is really what the challenges of moving quickly are, right? And I think some of these are relatively obvious and some of these maybe not so much. Losing visibility is definitely in the obvious category, but it requires a little bit of explanation. I think for those of you who have gone through that hyper growth in the past, there's this real kind of you almost pinch yourself moment where you blinked and the business is twice as large, and with twice the size moving, it seems at 10x the speed, right? So I think one of the key things for me, the key challenges that we've observed at Cognite is that we have to rethink our processes. We have to rethink how we engage with other departments, much faster than we thought we would have had to, if that makes sense. So, as things move faster, we lose visibility. The informal coffee catch up that we used to do with each sales rep doesn't work anymore. Close dates are changing faster than we can keep up with. And it causes the services teams really play catch up, right? And I guess the main point here is that if we're not proactively, let's say, hardening our process to be ready for this increase in pace, we're going to be on the back foot, right? And when we play catch up, it causes each team to look downward. And we did kind of go through this at Cognite, where instead of each team continuing, the sales to success or sales to services handover is one of the most important times in a customer journey. But if we don't have that process optimized and ready to stretch, but not break, when we really start injecting pace into the growth of the business, that then causes teams to look downward and kind of harden and optimize their own area instead of kind of driving collaboration across different functions in a more kind of customer-centric way. So the kind of the classic services team having its oh shit moment and scrambling to sort out their process means they take the eye off the ball of what the customer needs, which is kind of one of the big challenges that organizations going through high growth experience. That leads then to more reactive delivery, right? So if we are putting more stuff into the funnel, into the sales funnel, more deals coming in, services then loses the control of what they have to deliver, right? Their involvement, as if we've blinked and the pipeline is twice as large, it's harder for services to be as involved in the pre-sales process. So you move from being on this proactive footing where you can engage with each prospect and really kind of tailor the package of delivery that the customer needs that also will drive value for your business and not kind of be a total margin suck. But you lose that proactivity, you lose that front-footedness and have to kind of be beholden then to whatever sales is selling, because there's this healthy tension, right? We need to grow, but we also need to ensure that what we deliver can make a customer successful long-term. But if I'm not available, I'm too busy sorting out our visibility issue, let's say, to be in every prospect meeting, we've got a real challenge. And at Cognite, we went through this. We had more RFPs, as we really, we had our Series B in, I think, June of last year, and just about a year ago, I think it was. And we had more RFPs than we knew what to do with. And we didn't have the right services set up to go and engage with sales and prospects in a way that allowed us to set the customer up and retain that proactive footing. And an example, Zoe, I think from IncoPro that is relevant, very kind of minor change. To regain that footing, I remember we created a onboarding start date one field in the Salesforce opportunity, and made it so that only you had the power to fill in that field, right? And then we, again, getting pretty tactical here, but had a validation rule that meant that you couldn't advance the deal past 60% without an onboarding start date. Please contact the head of onboarding, right? So maybe it was not the most elegant solution, but it certainly changed the momentum. So sales came to services instead of kind of to understand when we'd be able to deliver, so that we can remain proactive. And then obviously that doesn't set, if we don't have that control, we aren't set up for post-sale success, right? If we are kind of, sales comes in and says, look, we promised the customer we'd start tomorrow, and then we start tomorrow, and then we don't do a great job doing delivery. Well, case volume, customer satisfaction, net revenue retention, they all suffer post-delivery. So that reactive delivery is a real challenge that we've seen as well. And then the last point I'll make quickly is around this idea of SaaS proliferation. I think when teams are focused less on collaboration because they have to almost retrench back to focus on only their KPIs in their little silo, we get this thing called an org that I'm going to say I like to call, I don't work in marketing, so it's not a very fancy title, but this idea of an org chart tech stack. So this is your domain now, right? I'm stepping out into that, but this idea of an org chart tech stack where each team kind of in a moment of panic because they can't cope with the millions of Slack messages, spreadsheets, and pointless meetings, buys a solution that works for the next 3 months, but then in 3 months is obsolete and out of date. Right. And then they don't think about how that tool needs to integrate with the sales team's tool or the CS platform, right? If services is the buyer. So we see kind of when we are in this reactive motion, we make these kind of panic decisions to solve our immediate workflow issue without thinking kind of outside in about how the customer's data and journey should be reflected in the overall tech stack. And at Cognite, what we did is we created, and also at Fair Sale, we created a PMO function to really kind of own all the post-sale technology to try and ensure that we were making smart decisions, not just for our needs today in one team, but our needs more holistically across the business.
And at Cognite, Alex, at what point would you say was really the trigger point for you when you kind of switched that narrative and used tech to fix some of those problems you mentioned?
Well, I remember when I joined the business, we were on spreadsheets, and we, I almost hesitate to be so detailed, but it's after 5 o'clock where I'm at. So there's no rules. We were using spreadsheets, and then there was a aversion to using the data that we had in Salesforce to forecast the project start date. So there was this kind of like, and that, let's not blame anybody about it, but this is the reality. We were we had to do an extra sync to say, is this the close date or the actual date, right? And there was just this real, and I know we're going to talk about it in a second, but there was this real kind of challenge or almost immaturity around trusting data to drive our process. And I think, one of the lessons that I've learned in my career is you have to let go and kind of, relax and go through the turbulence of change management, and then you'll come out the other side stronger. But we were hesitant to do that. So that was kind of the impetus for a lot of the change, investing in technology across our customer journey. But also the board, right, came in and wanted to start looking at things like margin or basic stuff in the new world that is now not a luxury to track, but a requirement, right, in this new world of responsible growth. So board level requests that we're going to take more than one Salesforce dashboard to answer. Also kind of, let's say, push the pedal down to the floor to speed up our transition.
I think as well, we can resonate with a lot of that from our time at IncoPro as well. And definitely the onboarding field that you mentioned were the good days when I had that power to say exactly when the onboarding capacity, the team had capacity to do those projects. And that just feeds in nicely, as if we planned it, to our next checklist, which you'll all get after the webinar, which really just goes through or highlights, the areas to watch when you are scaling. And as I said, that will be something that you receive afterwards as well. I am cautious that we all want to hear from Alex to talk about the early signs of those scaling slippages that he mentioned. So without further ado, back over to you.
Sure. And probably much to your chagrin, I'm going to go back previous. You don't need to change the slide, but I'm going to just mention the last item on the checklist, which I think is super interesting. For those with a keen eye, you may have seen it, but it was about the customer journey and kind of iterating on that as a team. And there's this theme that I'm hearing more and more in kind of the customer success post-sale space around treating your customer journey as a product where you make releases and kind of iterate the journey itself. And technology, of course, we roll out technology in a release-like way. We're going live with this tech, but also the process and the enablement around all of that, treating it as a product with a monthly or twice or bi-monthly release is something that I think is super interesting and has helped us drive more adoption of the changes that we're making to cope with fast scaling. Speaking of fast scaling and the challenges of that, let's talk a little bit about some early warning signs, right? So what are the signs that we're headed down the fast scaling unhappy path that we've discussed, and we're starting to lose control and getting on that reactive back foot? I think the one that really resonates with me is this idea of the evolving ideal customer profile. In scale ups, earlier stage, you're finding product market fit and your breadth of right fit customer, or maybe you don't know your right fit customer, right? So you're trying things and you're experimenting, and usually you're coping sometimes for product gaps or not perfect fit to the product as it stands today, but maybe good fit for the product of the future customers. You're coping with delivery, right? And you need to customize the product in a more detailed way. You may need to kind of, the services engagements may be more complex because you haven't figured out what works and what doesn't. Where you, I think, start to see a challenge is the business now moving forward in the theme of responsible growth, the business starting to narrow that let's say breadth of ideal customer profile, right? So we start with quite a wide net as we try and find our right fit, and we start to narrow that down as we know and have more, let's say, practice in finding which customer really fits within our ICP. So we start refining and changing the ICP, but the challenge there is along the customer journey, that refinement, which, I'm sure as a business, you're saying, we're going to not target this customer. We're going to go up market to customers that we know we can make successful. Services is still doing implementations and engaging with customers that are not in the current right fit, right? And sales can start, there's a 6 to 12 month delay before the post-sale team really kind of feels the change of that ideal customer profile refinement. So I think, one of the early warning signs, and what I'm trying to say is that, marketing and sales may change the message and only target customers that we know are going to be less complex and a better fit with our product. But that has to go through your sales cycle to get to the services team. So when marketing changes the message on the website, right? I'm back in your area again. It's, there's customers we're currently selling to that maybe take 3 months to convert, and we still have to implement those customers. There's customers currently in implementation that may be completely not relevant for that new refined ICP. So I think there's a real process as we now target not just investing at all costs with services to get customers to be successful, but responsible growth. There's a real process where we have to balance the business's desire to kind of move forward in a more sustainable way with the needs and promises we made to our customer, right? So I think one sign or early warning sign is you're acquiring better fit customers and your messaging is changing, but the actual reality on the ground and delivery is not changed yet, right? So services really wants to standardize their approach because that's what the business is saying, but you have customers whose expectations are not standard, right? So there's a delay there. I think the maybe the more obvious one is around margin, right? I mentioned earlier, boards are now looking at margin, the excuse of this is an investment, right? Or this is an investment customer where we're trying something. I don't think is a valid excuse anymore, right? We have enough services revenue. We don't care so much about making money on services. We care on having a healthy margin and using services to deliver successful net dollar retention, increasable, new term, customers, right? So I think that's really something that, when people start to all of a sudden, there's this knee-jerk reaction, which is happening, I think now, if you haven't been asked what your margins are, you're going to be asked by your investors or your finance team in this new era of responsible growth. And, if that's a 3-month calculation process, that's definitely a sign that maybe you've scaled beyond the capability of your current process. I think the last thing for me is this idea, this exit pressure, right? If sales is increasing, we're investing more in customer acquisition, we're growing more quickly, and we're not able to cope, we're on that reactive back footing and we're losing that control that we talked about earlier. You're going to have CS and support also filling that gap. So services, there might be a bit of a crunch in terms of services capacity, but if CS and support are starting to inherit customers that are unhappy, or you have differing experiences or variations in the onboarding satisfaction, that's also a sign that things are maybe moving along, or the business is not coping with that fast growth. And just one tactical example, we've implemented a post-project survey, 2 questions that we send out at the midpoint of a project and at the end of a project. And one of the questions that we'll ask is about, do you feel like we are delivering what we said we would deliver in the sales process? And in the next 12 months, how likely do you think you are to achieve your business goals? So one question looking back, right, to compare with the expectations that were set, and one question looking forward to kind of give a bit of a forewarning to support and customer success after delivery that maybe this customer is not in a happy place. That's been helpful, but when we start getting lower scores, it obviously implies that there's some challenge or early warning sign in our high, fast scaling environment that we maybe need to recalibrate toward.
I think as well, just on that point, something we did at IncroPro as well was at the start of the onboarding just to capture what those business goals were. So when we were then working through the start of the onboarding experience to make sure that the whole team had that at front of mind, and whatever we were doing, we were working towards that customer goal. And it wasn't something that we had to ask the customer again. We knew because we'd worked with sales beforehand and kind of bridged that gap there as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're now going to go on to our final piece before we look quickly at our Precursive product demo and then jump into the Q&A. So Alex, let's talk about how to excel during hypergrowth?
Yeah, so we spent lots of time talking about problems, right? And there were a few maybe more tactical solutions in there, but I think really this last section here is about how do we cope with that fast growth and how do we excel, to use the word. I'll go quickly through the first one. It's quite obvious, right? It's the antidote to most problems, yet it's so simple but so hard, it seems, for organizations to really rally around this point. Real-time data is really table stakes, right? We're going to make decisions based on data. The system of record is not a luxury. The system of record is the Bible, so to speak, for any services organization that needs to deliver in a high velocity sales environment, right? New deals come in the pipeline every day. So we need to make sure we're mobilized and ready to go. But if that system of record isn't accurate, you've got a blind spot, and then you're on that back foot in that reactive motion, right? So I think for me, the most important thing is aligning all teams around the system of record, not, as Cognite learned the hard way, pull up spreadsheets that are downloads of that system, but ultimately what's in there is the truth. And maybe we need to break a few eggs. And if oh yeah, I forgot to update the onboarding date, sorry. Well, maybe we need to kind of let the organization suffer just a little bit to learn the lesson, because it's a short-term pain for, I think, long-term gain. Because we ultimately need to set the right expectations with our customers, to ensure that we're delivering to their expectation. One of the things that we use at IncoPro, because, I think bluntly, our pipeline accuracy was needed development, let's say, to use a performance review terminology. We use a 60-60 report. Every opportunity 60 days or less out from closing, and every opportunity greater than 60%. And that helped us find those 20% opportunities that we're supposed to close tomorrow. And then we were able to, tag so-and-so in the op and ask them to change it. It's not a very elegant solution, but it meant that we were a little bit cleaner in terms of our ability to forecast. And I think the most important thing, if you can really nail that connection between sales opportunity close dates and project resource bookings, is all the gains that you're making in pipeline accuracy as a business, which is obviously especially in a climate like this, going to be super important, but organizations put a lot of money into that, right? Buying tools that sit on top of Salesforce, for example. If you have a really tight connection between the op close date and the project resource booking, all the gains you make in pipeline accuracy will then naturally flow into forecast accuracy. But if that link isn't airtight, then those investments maybe don't pay dividends in the post-sale resource space, right? So that's quite an obvious one, I think. Visibility, or actually, let's say predictability, is of course exceptionally important as well. Kind of goes to that first point, but I think one of the things that we've really focused on is helping or trying to educate the organization around the emotional state of the customer. Right. Before I get into customer, the quite obvious point is that if you don't have predictability, and we go to that scenario I just mentioned where we promised a customer we were going to deliver tomorrow, but there's actually nobody available in the business to do that. That's just a really bad problem to walk back. But the solution to that problem is usually a delivery team solution or a customer solution. And what I mean by that is we either overload our delivery team, and in this era of great resignation, it's probably not a good idea to do that. Or we tell our customer, sorry, I know we said we gave you our word, but we're going to have to walk that back now, which is also a terrible solution, right? And I think, the one thing we always don't think about is the emotional state of the customer. We think about our process and our Salesforce fields, but, they signed a maybe 5-6 figure contract, and they expect this to happen and work. So I think, the important point from my perspective here is that without that predictability, you're not only letting yourself down, you're letting down the customer, right? So tying up those close dates and project resource allocations is exceptionally important. And I think my favorite point is about team alignment. And Zoe, I know you alluded to this earlier, but sales to success handover is an important process that we ran at IncoPro and we still run at Cognite. But sales to success doesn't mean customer success management. It means post-sale, right? So we're handing over the customer hypothetical pain or the actual pain and hypothetical value, and turning that into actual delivery and outcome realization for each customer, right? So professional services and customer success working together hand in glove. I've seen this work really well, where you kind of need a couple of points here. 2 handovers. I mean, no handovers is best, right? 1 handover, you're going to have to live with it. 2 is not really acceptable. And what I mean by that is a lot of organizations hand over from sales to delivery, and then delivery hands over back to CS. right? And that's for me, it's a very simple solution to avoid a second handover if you just introduce the CSM when you introduce services. And they don't have to be flying at 1,000 feet where PS is. They can be flying at 20,000 feet, but at least they're there with the customer. And we've actually used that to excel in hyper growth. The reality is sometimes we don't have predictability and services isn't ready to start tomorrow, right? So we use the CSM to come in and do a workshop to clarify their outcomes, which buys us a week or 2 weeks with the customer, because services isn't there yet, but we're clarifying the business goals of that customer. They feel like the onboarding has started, even though the PS team is not involved, right? So I think that's been a really effective way for us to provide a better customer experience, but also buy our services team's time, as maybe we don't have the ideal predictability that we would like. So I think that's an important point. And I think most philosophically, this idea that I just want to end with is this idea of the expectation gap between with your customer, right? Organizations invest so much money in technology, pre-sale to acquire customers, websites, fancy webinars, fancy slides. You had a lot of animations on these slides. I don't know how much you paid for those, Zoe. But it's a big investment, right? To market yourself and acquire an account. But sometimes organizations don't align toward the customer's to the expectation you've set with that customer in the sales stage, right? I might take you out to a nice dinner, right? I might have a fancy website, fancy proposal deck. And if your post-sale experience as a customer is not aligned to the expectation you set pre-sale, that emotional state, the customer emotional state will not be a positive one at that time. So we talked a little bit about people alignment, but I think the last point I'll make is about technology alignment or expectation alignment, right? Where, we're moving so quickly in the post-sale, we just have to cope with what sales is sending us. Here's our old 60-page discovery document that I send in a 2-sentence email. Hey, could you look at this and fill it out, please? We'll talk next week, right? That's not very good. But most importantly, a tech stack or a technology setup where the customer has maybe not a Word document at all, but the ability to look at their project management schedule, the Gantt chart in some type of community or technology, right? So the customer can log in, and something we've invested a lot in Cognite is this community-led approach where customers can log into our community. They can look at the status of their project. They can look at their success plans, their desired outcomes, all in one place, so that we live up to that expectation gap that we're setting in the sales phase. So I think not just aligning the people, but aligning the technology and aligning toward the customer expectation is also super important when things start moving really quickly.
Just following on from those points made there by Alex, we've got a really quick just scaling SaaS checklist. So here it just summarizes the areas of visibility mentioned by Alex, and you'll be getting this as well after our webinar today. This is also a great segue for our short walkthrough of our Precursive in action demo, which is coming up next, which will just highlight how you can achieve that greater visibility. While we'll go through this short demo, which I'll admit I prepared earlier, so we'll turn off my camera so you're not confused as to why you can hear my voice, but I'm not saying anything. It'd be great if you could start to submit your questions to us, because straight after this video, we'll go into our Q&A with Alex. And if you could submit those to all, because in the background, Robbie, our VP of Marketing, will be collating those for us. So without further ado, let's go into that product demo. Okay, so now it's time to take a look at how Precursive enables those fast scaling SaaS companies. In case you've missed it, Precursive is the service delivery cloud for Salesforce, and we are 100% native to the platform. Today, I'll be talking you through how Precursive can help your company scale through closing the gap between sales and delivery, through using automated project creation, looking at demand forecasting, and most importantly, collaborating with your customers. Let's start with closing the gap between sales and service delivery. At Precursive, we understand the importance of the transition between sales and their services teams. We make this so easy within Precursive. When the sales pipeline reaches a certain stage, a project is created automatically within Precursive. Typically, depending on what has been sold or what's in your statement of work, the project will have the relevant start date, budget, revenue, and resource requirements automatically. The opportunity and the project can stay in sync. So for example, if the close date pushes out the project, can be updated along with the people assigned or those planning for the project. So you can see that we're looking at the opportunity for trotters, independent traders, which you may or may not recognize. And as soon as our opportunity hit the negotiation stage, a Precursive project was automatically created. And if we click into this, we can see that within the project plan, the tasks for the project are automatically populated, and that all-important resource request was automatically created. Now, sticking on this theme, let's look at the forecast demanding capabilities of Precursive. Given that, as I've mentioned, we are 100% native to Salesforce, we of course leverage the Salesforce reporting engine, which allows for some powerful ways to create tailored reports and dashboards. Continuing with our example, this dashboard will enable companies to scale as it shows the overall utilization of the team. It also shows all soft allocated work and work that still needs to be scheduled or allocated. So as a resource manager or project management lead, I can see where I need to hire and if I need to smart hire ahead of time. I can compare the effort needed versus our availability. Anybody that is allocated will receive a notification of the project and its status in parallel to being assigned. Therefore, this gives your team a better view of what work is upcoming and the relevant staffing needs and timelines, therefore reducing the amount of admin time that is spent allocating resources and allowing you and your team to mobilize faster. If we quickly navigate to the Precursive plan, that I can do so here, we can see that we are able to look at all of the resource requests for our upcoming project. If we look at trotters, independent traders, we can see that we have been asked to allocate a consultant. If we select that consultant, what Precursive will now do is look to see who is available at that time. We can also further filter this to add resource tags, so we can see if we're looking for a specific resource with specific skills. We can do this for any of our projects along this left-hand side here. So for example, if we go to the next one down and select project manager, we can see the available project managers for this particular project. And there might be some names you recognize there. Now, let's move on to collaborating with your customers. We know that this is key, especially within businesses that are scaling. So going back to our Precursive board, we know that it can be hard to collaborate with your customers, especially when you're working within that high velocity service delivery environment. And Precursive allows you to seamlessly collaborate with your customers from the start with our customer workspace. You can give your customers access directly from the Precursive board to your customer workspace, which is hosted on Salesforce Experience Cloud. Once that is done, your customers can self-serve their own project updates by logging in to their Precursive customer workspace. You can move away from those long email chains and manual updates by asking your customers to upload their documents directly within the portal. You can also ask questions to your customers, and your customers can ask questions to you. You can assign your customers tasks and give them clear updates on deadlines, all directly from within the workspace. Precursive Customer Workspace will enable your team to manage the implementation of more projects concurrently. Okay, and we're back. Let me just click off to this and we'll jump. So while we gather all of our questions that have hopefully been submitted for Alex, we will of course circle back to where you can get more of our Precursive content later. Don't worry, they are not all voiceovers. I'm including my
I quite enjoyed that.
Other things, other available contents at precursive.com. But before we go into our Q&A, Alex, would you like to just quickly talk about the CS Awards?
Wow, I'm so surprised to see this in here. Yes, I'd love to. So one of the things I didn't mention in my intro, folks, just super quickly, customer success excellence has been a labor of love side project, really designed to recognize the best in customer success. There's lots of loud voices blowing hot air into the customer success environment, myself included, but there's also a lot of people who don't say very much that are just executing at an exceptional level. So we launched customer success excellence 2 years ago, believe it or not. And we've held out for an in-person event. Nominations for EMEA are closed, but on June 15th, we are awarding the best in success in London at a very fancy awards gala. And the connection here is Precursive is one of our sponsors. We're very excited to have you sponsoring the event and highlighting those who are really executing in a world-class way. So you can get more information there on the website. And I do believe, am I about to break your news, Zoe, or shall I, you go ahead, or shall I say it?
I'm unsure.
You're unsure. Good. Well, I'm pretty sure Precursive have arranged a discount code for tickets that they're going to send to you after the webinar. So I'll take that news and say it. And if you haven't Precursive, well, now you're going to have to. So there you are.
Either way, we are.
Good. Well, hope to see you there in London. We're really excited about this event. It's the first one. You know, a new exciting initiative in the customer success space, if I don't say so myself, but show up and you can judge for yourself.
No, definitely. Excellent. Right. Thank you so much. I'm now going to ask Robbie if he could direct some questions to Alex, please, that you've all been asking.
Hello. Yes, we've got some few questions coming in, and if you keep them coming in on the Q&A function, you should see a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. You can ask them to everyone so I can see it, and then we can answer them for you live here. So keep them coming, and we'll ask the first one now. So Philip has asked you, Alex, you've mentioned some warning signs, and they seem to come from a macro environment external to the post-sales function. Are there any observations or thoughts on warning signs which come from that post-sales function? Yeah, no, good point, Philip, and thanks for your question. You know, the warning signs we talked about are the evolving ideal customer profile, margin mattering, and exit pressure, right? So all of those things are not directly from the post-sale group, as you suggest. The two things that really come to mind for me around warning signs from the post-sale function are alignment and visibility. And let me explain what I mean by that. Alignment, I think, is something that we see immediately when we get in the room with a customer, either reviewing their desired outcomes in a sales to success kickoff environment, right? Where we are saying, you know, playing back to that customer in the kickoff call, success and professional services should probably be there. Success is talking about, just to clarify, your business goals are X, Y, Z. And then professional services is talking about the project timeline and how we're going to implement the solution to align with those business goals. But the reason we do that at the start is to identify early if the customer says, hang on a second, I thought you were going to do this and this, and actually my business goals are that, ABC, right? So that to me is one of the earliest warning signs. And we've learned this lesson the hard way. Deal with it right then. If it's a change request, right? If it's something that we say, sorry, that, you know, there's not this alignment here, and we just take it on the chin, right? But go through that process early, because the other thing to think about is the executive sponsor is probably not going to show up for any other meeting except maybe go live, right? So they'll be there for the kickoff, and you'll lose them for however long the implementation is most of the time. So it's a good time to realign if you are not aligned. That's a warning sign. The in-project survey I mentioned is a good way to halfway through the project, just get a little bit of a temperature check. And then in terms of visibility, I think the thing that we've implemented at Cognite is this idea of project health being a factor in customer health. So we are a Precursive customer. And in Precursive, we've added some fields that allow us to create a project health flag. So I can look at all open projects and not just look at the margin or the cost or the overrun, hopefully not very much overrun. But I can also look at the red, amber, green health, and it looks both at some qualitative and quantitative factors. So that tells the CS team in our customer health score that this customer is yellow or red because we have a project issue, and allows them to dive in and help and support the delivery team to resolve it. So they don't inherit something. They have an active hand in preventing it from being, let's say, inherited after go live. So hopefully that answers your question. Great. I've got some coming in to me personally. One from Lena. Do you have any best practices on how to bridge sales, product, and success teams? I'll just quickly butt in and say we've got a lot of content on that on our resource section at precursive.com. But Alex, do you have any real life examples of that? Yeah. So we don't have much time, and I could go on this one for a while, so I won't. But I'd say at a high level, what's been helpful for us is, again, I go back to altitudes. I'm a very simple person. I like to think of things in pictures. The picture for me is how high you're flying the plane, or kind of how into the weeds you're going to be, right? at 40,000 feet, every quarter, sales, product marketing, success, support, the entire group gets with the product team and talks about bigger thematic changes to the roadmap, right? But more tactically than that, we integrate our opportunities and our customer accounts into our product ideation tool. And if there's a custom feature request from our customer, we can flag that. Both it's pretty standard to do that post-sale, right? Let's submit some enhancement requests from this existing customer, but we also submit enhancements and link them directly to opportunities in the pre-sales phase as well. And that's been helpful because it at least aligns our data so we can have a conversation around one view of reality. The worst thing is, the worst thing that can happen is the loudest voice wins instead of the one with the most data to support it wins, right? I need to catch your phrase for that second part of that, but you have a very persuasive sales rep that needs this to close the final deal for their quota in the quarter. That's good for them, but is that good for the business? And is it good for all of your customers? So I think getting kind of a one level view on the data is maybe the first step, and hopefully some good examples in there for you. And actually one more example, because I can't help myself. We've recently launched product ideation in our customer community, and that's been really helpful to drive the product team. Especially in scale ups, I find product teams are maybe too inwardly focused, not because they're doing anything wrong, but because going back to what we said right at the beginning of this conversation, they're focused looking downward and focusing in on their area to optimize that because we're growing so quickly. So we don't spend as much time with customers. We instead spend time, making sure our process is working and engaging with engineers, looking inwardly, right? So CS and services can step 1 foot into the product lane and get more data from customers and send it to the product team. By launching the ideation module, probably earlier than conventional wisdom would suggest in our community, we've gotten our product team a little bit further out and they have an efficient and easy way to engage with our customers. So that's been quite helpful, even just from like a macro level kind of company culture perspective.
Great stuff. We've got a question from Walter. For enterprise level sales, do you ever see professional services built into the subscription pricing? And with CS and PS aligning more closely to cover ongoing account management and technical enablement for the overall customer lifecycle?
Well, I don't know how you've read my mind or gotten a view into my background, Walter, but at IncoPro, we did a lot of services subscription because it was a legal brand protection solution, and the industry standard is legal teams will buy your software to enforce their trademarks and then also buy hours from you for trained analysts in brand protection and trademark enforcement to operate the platform. So in that way, yes, we definitely had a subscription model with our customers. At Cognite, we also have some subscription services around things like solution support. And that's not just, Cognite is a industrial data platform working with the world's largest energy, manufacturing, power utilities, and renewables companies to help them get value from their data. A lot of these organizations, if we were doing our job poorly, we'd say, great, you bought a data platform, bring your data science team in and we'll train them up on how to use it. And then they kind of look at us saying, data science team, we're still migrating some things to the cloud, right? We don't have a data science team. So we then obviously have a big services engagement to deliver value on top of their data, building dashboards and use cases on top of our Cognite Data Fusion platform. And then the customer, once we built it, who maintains it? They don't have the capability in-house, so we offer some solution support, subscription services on top of our professional services engagement. So I guess that's the first part of your question. So yes, I've seen it personally. But I think your point around aligning success and professional services is a really interesting one, where, I think the most interesting thing for me in those scenarios is that the customer is receiving an outcome. They are not delivering the outcome themselves, right? So at IncoPro, I always found it really challenging as a customer success leader to try and talk about business goals when the customer was rarely using our product. The delivery of professional services in their subscription environment was a monthly report. You'll have to fact check me here, Zoe. What, 10, 20, 30 slides about the activity that we've done? Maybe more on the 30 slide side, I think. And that was the value that we would deliver to the customer, right? Because it wasn't tangible. Yes, we took this listing that was selling a counterfeit version of your product off this sales channel in France or the sales channel in Indonesia. And here's evidence that we did that for you. But the value was in a PowerPoint instead of them using the product themselves. So It was interesting and challenging at the same time. We couldn't do things like your usage is increasing or decreasing. The usage statistic was not as relevant for us. So the alignment was really important. And the way we aligned best was we would, essentially customer success orchestrated, right? We orchestrated the QBR process, engaging with executives, and the subject matter expert was professional services, where they would go in and talk to the customer about the action that they'd taken. And then we get back to the product roadmap and other things like that. So that's how we aligned a little bit more closely within the account management phase. I haven't really touched on your point around technical enablement, but maybe there's some resources on precursive.com, or we'll do that at some other juncture.
Could be our next topic.
Great.
And then this is probably the final one, but obviously some people get the third parties to supply services, and sometimes they can be unpredictable. What are the early warning signs there that if you're scaling with a partner delivery?
Yeah, this is a really, really good point. And actually, I was going to mention it, but as Zoe will attest that I always do, I blew past our time limit just a little bit. So I refrained from even kind of ringing the partner bell, because partners can be so powerful, but the engagement strategy can be so convoluted. Because you're adding another party with competing interests, not always competing, but they're different interests, right? And so the first thing that I didn't mention is if you don't have your visibility, or let's say your predictability process set up correctly before you start moving quickly, you're going to not have resource to deliver projects, and you're going to want to onboard partners. But I'm going to guess if you didn't have your visibility and predictability model set up correctly, you don't have a partner enablement or success function spun up yet. So that's more kind of, let's say, enablement debt that you have to deal with to onboard partners and make them successful, to then reduce the pressure, right? So it becomes almost like this, I don't know what the right expression is, but and even more headwinds to trying to get that momentum back, or the getting off that reactive footing. What I've seen work with partner engagements, or I guess the early warning signs was your question. We're pretty clear up front with partners. Two things I would say. We had success, especially at Fair Sale, working with partners in a similar growth stage to us. Everybody wants to play with the big names, right? Because you think it gets you market share. We found partnering with specialist, more boutique scale-up partner organizations was helpful, because the power balance was a little bit better. That allowed us to go to the partner and say, hey, we're going to treat you with respect, and we're going to make you one of our partners and help you win against those big guys, right? But in return, we asked for some type of control, where I have the ability to send you that mid-project survey from the vendor, not from the partner, right? And better yet, it appears in the product, right? But we have some control where we're still engaging with the customer at various touch points to really inspect partner quality, right? So essentially, I think, the same answer I gave around some of those micro level, not macro level early warning signs in the first question, I think apply to partners, but you have to get the alignment and support from partners that's how the relationship is going to work. And sometimes, you're just the tech vendor and they don't want you speaking to their customer ever. And I would reject the premise that it's their customer, especially if they're buying the software from you as a vendor, but then buying the services from the partner. So yeah, again, I think maybe the topic of another webinar. I'm not signing myself up. Okay, you probably had enough of that, but
we'll find someone more knowledgeable.
Yeah, good. Yeah, good plan.
Great stuff. I think we'll leave it there. If you've got any more questions, feel free to pin them over. We can answer them on email afterwards, but I'm just conscious of time. If you have any more burning questions, please direct them to hello@precursive.com. But other than that, I'll pass back to Zoe to round off the webinar.
Thank you, Robbie. As we've mentioned, we have lots more content over at precursive.com, but you can also see us in person and live at lots of events coming up, such as the World Tour in London as well. So in case you missed it, it's precursive.com, all of the content, some great product videos. And if you'd like to get in touch to talk to us about anything, that's the place to head to as well. So thank you very much for everyone who joined, and a massive thank you to our guest speaker, Alex, as well. As Robbie mentioned, if you have any more questions, please direct them to us. But otherwise, thanks for joining, and we'll hopefully see you all soon. Bye.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.